theory by Ryan and Decci, starting from the 70s. Does anybody know self-determination theory? Of course not. We're in natural sciences. We don't teach information from beyond the divide. They started with an experiment that was very puzzling for them, because this is the US 1970, and there's a theory that you give someone more salary, they get more motivated, more money. And they give people these mechanical puzzles that are fascinating to play with, and one group gets $1 for each puzzle they solve, and the other group there's no mention of money. Okay? And they let them do that for half an hour, and then there's a break, and they observe through a one-way mirror, and what happens they observe what happens during the break. And people who got $1 for each puzzle they solved put down the puzzles. And people where there was no mention of money kept playing with it on their own time. This is very puzzling. Money reduces motivation for tasks that are intrinsically interesting. And they kept on studying this, and they discovered 3 components that are essential for motivation, intrinsic motivation. And there's a recent meta study about 500 experiments that support this fundamental categorization system. Quite well supported. I want to tell you what those 3 factors are, because they help me diagnose my own motivation and motivation of my students. Because, we think sometimes, we say that student is motivated as if it's like a genetic trait. But in fact, a lot of it has to do with the conditions that you can either create for yourself, or that the advisor had, so your human rights are your advisor to create for you, but you have the agency to tell the advisor what you need. So the first one is called competence. It's the belief that I have some control over my experiments, my work. It's the belief that I have some control over my work, my project. Now, I say the belief because you might be competent but not believe it. No motivation. Or you might believe that you're competent, but you're not competent. Motivation, but not wrong. Okay, so here I'm going to draw a graph from this field of positive psychology. On the x-axis is flow. Flow is the feeling I was born to do this, time flows differently, it's intrinsically enjoyable. And on this axis is the task easy or impossible. And flow is maximum when you're kind of close to the edge, not too close, of your capabilities. Now, as an advisor, I was able quite quickly to ruin competence, somebody's motivation. I just want to tell you what a mistake I made as a beginning advisor. What is it? For intrinsic motivation, you have to keep at this level, and it's a moving window, right? When you're a beginning student, it's different from when you're an advanced student. My first graduate student, Nitzan Rosenfeld, I gave him his first project. He never grew bacteria before. I said, this is what I said to him. I came from a postdoc, like a speeding train. I gave something that I thought was kind of easy for me, but take this commercial 96-volt fluorimeter and reprogram the temperature to oscillate, and then measure how the frequency of oscillation affects bacterial growth rate. And as I said, he never grew a bacteria. So after 2 weeks, his motivation went down. So I said, okay, so let's start again. And just do streak out some bacteria on a plate. Good. So good positive reinforcements and simple experiment. All right, now do a growth curve. Good. Now do another. Let's do it again to see the reproducibility error. So some people say, how can you say good about something as simple as a growth curve? I say, no, it's exactly that. If the student is here and can succeed, then this is positive reinforcements that you build it. Now, how can you know where the student is? I mean, as students become more and more skilled, this moves, right? It's the listening thing. As a mentor, it's constant communication with students. How is this project going? Now, a lot of you are students, right? You're not mentors. So what am I talking about? ideal mentor that listens to you, and so maybe you're not in this situation. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. But if you're not, I want to say that there's still things you can do you're not passive. For example, have one of those scary conversations where you let your mentor know how they can mentor you better. Not every mentor is open to that. So, you have to prepare yourself. You have to prepare yourself so as not to raise resistance. Practice in your peer group or with your colleague. What do you want to say, etc. So maybe all the time you're here. Maybe all the time you're here. So that's competence, right? Okay, that's the first vitamin. No human being can have intrinsic motivation without it. The second one is called autonomy. Autonomy is the feeling that I'm in origin. I'm not a pawn. No, I'm not like somebody like a piece of a chess piece that somebody else is playing with. Or in other words, I own my project. So this again is essential. There's a very common mistake that mentors make that ruins autonomy. Can anybody guess what that is? Micromanagement. So again, there's a range. Different people need different amount of information. But if I exaggerate, every 15 minutes come and say, "How's your project going?" Then you take away the locus of responsibility from the student to the mentor. You take away the autonomy. Of course, yeah, your intention is good. You think you'll make the mentor thinks it'll make the project go better because they're applying psychological pressure, etc. But the effect is to reduce autonomy. So if you're in a situation where you feel that autonomy is not there, for instance, if you're being told what to do, you have no choice, then it could be that your intrinsic motivation is low. And some people tell me that it's cultural. There's something different cultures. This need is more important. This need is more important. That could be, but apparently human beings share these needs, maybe in different ways. So you can't expect as a beginning student to choose your own project. No, maybe like your second project or something like that. Maybe as a postdoc. But inside the project, there's lots of choices to make. It doesn't have to be big choices, small choices also. And taking care of your own autonomy is again something to diagnose at least. And if you have a problem with autonomy, you can again talk to your advisor or do a secret project the advisor doesn't know about. You know about the secret projects, how exciting they are?
Yeah.
And how that's because of autonomy. Or like Google gives their workers some X amount of time per month to do their own project. That's autonomy. That's highly motivating. Any comments about what I said so far? Yeah?
How do you balance between long-term goal and a short-term goal?
Can you give an example?
Well, I mean, if I can, let's say if I have a project that I think will be of bigger significance, or I guess maybe choosing a project versus, just versus daily experiments, like that. Because every day you have to make choices in terms of, how, and not just your immediate study, but things that you want to do maybe later on, or things like that. I mean, what is your advice on that?
I'm not clear if I understood exactly the context that you mean. But maybe we can talk about that after. It sounds bad. I'd be happy to talk about it. Okay.
I was just going to make a comment that I've noticed that there's like different choices in the way that people describe their advisors, namely in like if they say my boss versus my advisor and how much that person micromanages them.
Yeah.
So as like a simple cultural change is like not referring to your advisor as a boss, it puts you in the position of them.
Interesting. That's something it's very interesting when you say how I call my advisor is already a position I take and what I expect from them.
Like when the other graduate students, they call them boss, so it like.
It's interesting. No,
this is not my personal story, but it's what I've noticed about other.
As I said, I'm a great believer in language because language is like a metaphor. So if we're in science, we don't talk about science. So we have to take our ideas from somewhere else. So if we take them from like one of those bosses with a cigar that kind of makes the ashes on the people on the fort constructed like that, right? That's like a metaphor, right? So what do I expect from my mentor? And it generates behavior. So it's very simple. Okay, so we said competence autonomy, and the last one is called social relatedness. And social relatedness because we're social beings, human beings are social beings. And social relatedness, for example, there's someone I respect that cares about my project. And another aspect of it is I'm part of a community. So, if you're in a group and you're the only, let's say, theorist and everyone else is an experimentalist, for example, or opposite, you are in danger of lacking social relatedness. If you're in a group where the advisor is very inaccessible, you need to get this vitamin from somebody else. And I say again that as a scientist, if you're in a situation where you're lacking this, if you recognize this, that you don't have somebody, basically, to do science, even people like Einstein and Newton, they had to have a friend that they could talk to almost every day. Einstein had this guy called Bessel. They would take walks. And Newton, even Newton, this very introverted person, had the Royal Society to argue with, and when he was so sensitive of criticism, he said, okay, I'm quitting Royal Society. He basically stopped doing science. He was on his own. He did a lot of very interesting biblical research and things like that. So if you're in a situation where you're lacking social readiness, I would say your primary task is to find one person, doesn't need to be two, that you can talk to. And this takes some effort to build a relationship, because building a relationship takes effort. And just to recognize how critical it is, like in the song about Mike Surratt, sort of supplied me with this social relatedness. And I'm part of a community, going to meetings, presenting a poster, seeing other people actually care about your research. Sometimes it's eye-opening, or talking to people who are in the same field. And sending your students to a conference, etc., build social relatedness. Group meetings. How many of you are in labs that have group meetings? So how are they structured?
Poorly.
Huh? Poorly. So what goes on in these group meetings?
We switch off between having round tables and then having someone give a talk on their research.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of times there's a talk about the research. In my group meeting, we sit in a circle, first of all, in the beginning, and we spend 40 minutes with this ritual and ask who's not here. I'm telling you this not to make you feel bad, but to give you ideas about what to ask for, what to set up in your lab, or when you're mentors, what to do. Some ideas. You don't have to. Each person can invent them. So, who's not here? So then the person is sick, so who called them so we can know that we take care of each other. And then we celebrate some birthday, or when we submit papers, not when we publish papers, but when we submit it, because we're not sick of them yet. And then there's cakes almost all the time. And then I just wait till say, okay, somebody who wants to say something to the lab, and I just wait till somebody says something. I saw a movie, or I went on vacation. Then we start talking, and before you know it, half an hour has gone by, and we model that we're here to talk not only about science, but to engage as people, talk about anything. And that little thing built a lot of social relatedness. So in my lab, there are n people, there's 20 people, and there are about n squared, right, n minus 1 over 2 pairs of people. Okay, you can prove that before. And a lot of these pairs are functional pairs that get science done because of, by the way, also having conversation. That's how I get so much science from my lab. And so for me, if you make it so you can say, okay, you spend half an hour or 40 minutes of your precious 2 hours not talking about the results, I say, yeah, because it's an effort. And I get this huge multiplier. And now if you're a graduate student and you're not in control, you're not in charge, right? You can still lead when you're not in charge by, I mean, what are ways to get these vitamins when you're not the mentor? Right? First, to recognize what's missing for you, and then to think of ways to address it, like peer groups, for example. Forming a peer group gets great social relatedness. Okay, any thoughts?
When you're doing a secret project, I mean, you're not in charge, so basically the funding is from the lab. How should you make a decision between telling your boss about the additional cost and actually doing it secretly?
Well, if it's a boss, not an advisor.
Yeah, exactly. In case of a boss.
How can you decide whether to reveal your secret project, seeing that it's done with resources from the lab?
Yeah.
Right?
Confess to the priest.
Confess to the priest.
Yeah, I think having a secret project is already, I'm not advocating it unless you're really in a bad situation, right? So it's usually good to be in communication and to negotiate basically a little bit of time to do some project on your own. But if it's a matter of trust and you can't, you're worried, can I tell or can't I tell? Yeah, it's a tough situation, and I'm generally for communication. But communication isn't something we study, so to do it right needs planning and practice before you have the conversation. Because there are ways you can say things that within 30 seconds raise a lot of resistance. And there's ways to say things that open up. So if you practice and ask the other person, okay, was that okay? He said, no, you can get to a good, because it's so important, this conversation in the end. So I'm for telling in general. Of course, it's very condition dependent.
You're a graduate student or someone who's not sort of in charge of setting up the lab culture or running group meetings. How do you have advice for promoting social relatedness within the lab?
Yeah. So maybe this question you raised, does anybody here have suggestions? What's your name?
Gabby?
For Gabby, how, when you're not an advisor, how you can do things that will increase social relatedness in the lab. Right? Any ideas that work for you?
Extracurriculars.
Like what?
Well, anything from just having drinks to doing something more significant
Nice.
outside of the lab.
Okay, so as students, invite people or get together for drinks or let's say a hike or a group activity like this.
Yes.
I agree. These things where you go out without the mentor, right? Just as a group. It's a situation where you can be in a different context, like our communities in the spa, right? In a different context, you can talk to each other. That builds a lot of social relatedness. Yeah, come on.
When I was in the UK, I was very surprised that they had they didn't work that much, but they still got a lot of done, maybe because multiply was one of the reasons, but they had both tea times after tea times and happy hours after work, that they all lived together.
Okay. So this organizing basically a tea time, for example. So there's one lab quite soon that does Chamishi Chatzil. Chatzil, how do you say that in English? Eggplant. They have eggplant Thursdays. Dad brings some organic eggplants and puts them in the toaster oven. And it's enough to get people to come. So, like you say, in different cultures, not all cultures work as intensely as in the United States, but still they have good productive science. So maybe there's not an equation between, absolute linear equation between time and productivity, but you say, how they spend that extra time, maybe building social relations gives them this extra compensation, which is more than linear. So tea time and, yeah, what else would you recommend for Gabby? Yeah?
Just generally getting active and knowing what other people are working on. Then if you see an article that might be interesting, sending it to them, hey, I saw this, maybe this is interesting to you, and kind of getting that kind of communication working behind the scenes. It doesn't have to be at the meeting.
So as an individual, if I got it right, as an individual you make the effort to talk to other people, see what they're doing, get to know it, and when you see a paper published in the same, that's relevant, send to them, and then they start to reciprocate, perhaps. So it's an effort you make. So I just want to say, the way we define leadership, it's a big word like a charisma, it's not like that. Leadership is the effort, it's an effort. It's the effort you make to help others reach joint purpose in the face of uncertainty. So doing something like this, now you're a graduate student, but you can be a leader, even though you're not in charge, by making an effort to help the others, the group, reach joint purpose, which is social relatedness, high motivation, and better science, in the face of uncertainty. Because when you come to somebody and ask them, what are you working on? It's really uncertain. It's very scary to talk to people if it's just the beginning or the first time. Hey, everybody, let's do a 90s dance party. Or let's go for, it's the first time. How will it, maybe I'll be left alone. Maybe I'll be isolated even more, right? So it's scary. But you keep doing it, the effort you make to help others reach joint purpose in the face of uncertainty. It's something that becomes an attitude for you after you do it in a while. And then part of your identity is that I make an effort. So how do you respond to these ideas?
I like that. I think the context in which that culture is a little bit hard to change is actually in sort of a more group meeting setting, sort of with the boss and all of that. And so I think it's easier for me to see in sort of the day-to-day lab setting as opposed to in the formal setting. So, but hopefully if you change it enough in the day-to-day, then that can kind of translate to the group.
Yeah, I say that if the lab is together and the size of group meeting is intolerable, then as a lab, you can very respectfully ask to make a change in the group meeting. You can't fire all of you. You're a union. If one person is scared to say it, but the whole group, so this is very critical because this group meeting, you spend 2 hours a week, if it makes you demotivated, it's very difficult to bear. So it's worth the effort to try to change by, first, advisors, I can say this, quickly we forget what it's like to be a student. And we have the reason sometimes we're making these mistakes is because it's not because we're evil, it's because we have a blind spot. We don't know that, we don't recognize the impact of our actions on others in a particular thing. And when you tell us, listen, I want to talk about how to make this mentoring more effective so we can reach our shared goal of better science. Tell us, Uri, I've been writing you emails and you're not answering me, for example. So, by the way, if you guys write me emails, I'll answer you because I'm better at it, because the student told me. And I have a blind spot about. So I look at the email and I say, okay, I'll answer it, and I forget it. So my students told me a lot. One student told me, Uri, I want to ask you a question, but don't answer it. I want to think about it. Don't answer it right away. So that was also very interesting for me, because I took away their autonomy, right? So if you as a group are able to communicate the situation to your advisor, the worst thing that can happen is that it'll continue. But there's a chance that you'll teach them something. And it's probably very, very scary and difficult, but the group has solidarity, and maybe you can learn from other groups how they did it. I hope. I know it's like a politician, but I think that in science, we're here to, yeah. not to get elected, but to just create this environment that we want. So even as apprentices, yeah.
Comment about this. We were having a discussion about mentoring some days ago with other classmates, and one of them said how important it is to have we were discussing how we need our mentor to say nice things to us, like this positive reinforcement. And she was saying like, oh, I actually do the same with my mentor, like going back, positive reinforcement when she does a positive reinforcement. So it sounds funny because it's like training your mentor, but in some way it makes sense. You don't say like, oh, I actually helps to hear the good, the positive critic, the good comments. Then sometimes the advisor doesn't realize he's not doing that, or that is actually important for you.
So I want to see if I understood you. What you're saying is that the student, when the mentor does something that's helpful, you give them a specific praise for that. And that reinforces that. And that's another way to do it. It's really good. Yeah. So that, just like in any relationship, we need information and communication in order to. There's no relationship that doesn't get stuck and has ruptures, mismatches, mistakes. It doesn't exist. The whole thing is about repair, communication, and I want to hear from this side of the room. Okay, all of the questions are for this group. I want someone here to speak.
What are your thoughts on, in some scenarios where there's sort of maybe a cultural difference in the lab or multiple cultures going on, and as a student, you may not know the best way to like bridge between one and the other. Is there any way to sort of involve your advisor in that, or is it really up to the group itself?
So yeah, science is multicultural, and as difficult it is to communicate with someone in your own culture. Somebody from across cultures, there's codes, it makes it even more difficult to communicate. So, and it's a huge topic, and one that of all the topics they talk about in lecture and stuff, it's the one that I've never actually studied. So I'm wondering, is there somebody here who has something that worked in your group that you saw worked well in a situation where there's more than one culture?
It's not an example, but knowing what the fundamental generator of the other culture is, I find very useful.
Fundamental generator of the other culture?
Yes, so more Eastern cultures are more interdisciplinary.
So what culture are you from?
I'm Turkish.
So what's the generator of your culture? You anticipate?
So for us, it is more so we are more interdependent on each other.
Okay.
In the sense that it is more important as a group to survive than as an individual to shine.
Okay.
So that really changes how people from my culture look at certain things. And from another culture, you might not really understand why I'm viewing that, but once you understand where that person is coming from, it's much easier to see that perspective.
Yeah.
Another thing,
Yeah.
that
Khalid, yeah.
I think sometimes I like to really to put the things on the table, to
What's the
celebrate the differences in the diversity, to recognize that, and to actually see how much more interesting it can make science and working together.
Yeah. Well, first, I agree. I think that having many people from as different from each other as possible is an asset, but there's also this misunderstandings that can happen. So, for example, I once saw this is in a business context, so it's not so relevant. I saw some businessmen demonstrating how they give their business cards. So in Indonesia, they say you have to present your business card with both hands and have the name directed at the person you're giving to. Otherwise, you might offend them. And in Germany, you might go like this. Okay, so, and they learn this in order to say some words in the language. And the person is already makes a big step forward. In Israel, we have a problem that if there's someone doesn't speak Hebrew, and the whole lab starts speaking Hebrew in their presence. They forget that they're there. I don't know if you in America this is so noticing what language we're speaking is like a big deal for us. But that maybe in the U.S. context is not that big a deal. But if three of you speak another language, not English, and there's an American coming, to remember to switch to English, not always, but in the right situation. But I think huge topic. Like, it makes me dizzy to think about, but something that we have to, as scientists, again, have language for it, basic principles, which I don't know what they are right now. But do you have ideas? You asked a question.
I would say anecdotally that obviously everyone eats, and the way that I've found to make connections, and so that the cultural misunderstandings that happen don't become static misunderstandings, they're like quickly laughed over, addressed as already having like a shared bond, and food is that for everyone. So, you know, go eat together, share food together, share meals, and form this commonality that everyone shares across all cultures. And then little things like, stupid things like how you hand the card over, you already like sort of see someone at a deeper level after you've like shared a meal with them.
Amazing. Okay, I think it's a good place to finish. So I hope this memory that you had about your day of high intrinsic motivation, okay, it will repeat now more as you can analyze for you and other people near you what's needed, what's essential for a human being to have this intrinsic motivation and the fascinating puzzles that we're solving inside science. And more generally, just to thank you for hanging around this like underground activity that we're doing, countercultural. Yeah?
Just before you finish, first thank you really much.
You're welcome.
Really, really nice. I'm just very curious, just for 1 minute, if you can tell us why are you interested about these things that are not that common to discuss about? What made you think about these things and get so involved in these thoughts?
So the first thing is that, as I said, as a graduate student and then as a new faculty member, I had a lot of difficult time. And I wished I had workshops like this, and so that keeps me going. So I never forget it. I have a lot of sympathy for people at this stage. And also, because of different lucky circumstances, like that I do theater, so I get exposed to how in art you deal with this, which is about the process. They have the other problem. They're all emotionally subjective, and they're objective and rational. That's the problem. And my wife's a clinical psychologist.
Oh.
So I read her books and papers. So I learned about psychology. It's amazing. And then I started getting information. The more information I got, I started taking workshops and learning how to be a facilitator. So now in Israel, in the last, since 2010, we've done 25 workshops for new faculty members. There's 300 faculty members in Israel, 2-day workshops. And so we want this whole country, Israel, to be like a better site for changing the culture of science. And these same workshops, like Galit Lav, brought them here to Harvard Medical School, and at MIT, there were a few, I think, also in Yale, and I heard from Jan that Stanford already had regular workshops for training. So science is very heterogeneous. So if Stanford discovered it, they don't tell Harvard or Princeton. That's the way we are. We don't talk about the subject because it's not important. It's not science, right? So we keep it to ourselves. So again, it's something we need to change. And then one day I discovered that I can also play my guitar, and this is so made me more motivated because of all these combined, and writing essays, etc., and meeting people that think the same way or are affected or become change agents adds another level of meaning for me as a scientist. So I think I'm a scientist, but if I just give talks like I did, I'm kind of in a small way re-inscribing the way things are. So I give this kind of talk also, and invite you to to add to your identity, to say, I'm a change agent, I do science, but I also do some effort to improve the culture of science. And I think science actually is not that difficult because we're all caring, conscientious, very skilled, talented people that know how to invent culture, invent language, invent ideas. And so I see the impact is huge. And there's a lot of change happening very quickly, not only because of me, of course, many people together. And I'm optimistic that the generation, things will be different. And this generation's task is to do that change. So thank you for asking me. And it's a good time to say good night, yeah, to continue enjoying this conference.